Should Christians celebrate Halloween? What do you mean, should Christians celebrate Halloween? Don't you know Halloween's evil? I always knew you Catholics were crazy, pagan ritual performing, devil worshiping. Are you sure about that? No. Okay, well, in this video, we're gonna talk about what Halloween actually is. Hey everyone, this is Braden from the Catechumen. In this video, I want to talk about some popular claims that like to be made every year when October rolls around, or even December for that matter. Hey, I wore a hat in that one too. I don't typically do that. And that is, Christians shouldn't celebrate Halloween because it has pagan origin. So first, we should probably talk about the origin of Halloween. The word Halloween is a contraction that comes from All Hallows Eve, or the Eve of All Saints' Day, which is a Catholic holiday that commemorates, well, you guessed it, all of the saints. From apostolic times, Christians have always commemorated a saint's martyrdom by celebrating a feast day on the anniversary of their deaths, typically involving their relics. An example of this is the martyrdom of Saint Polycarp, who was a disciple of the Apostle John and who was actually ordained to the bishopric of Smyrna by the Apostle John directly. And the martyrdom of Saint Polycarp was written directly after his death sometime in 155 AD. And it's literally one of the oldest writings that we have from the early church. This is what it says in chapter 18. The centurion then, seeing the strife excited by the Jews, placed the body in the midst of the fire and consumed it. Accordingly, we afterwards took up his bones as being more precious than the most exquisite jewels and more purified than gold, and deposited them in a fitting place, whither, being gathered together as opportunity is allowed us, with joy and rejoicing, the Lord shall grant us to celebrate the anniversary of his martyrdom, both in memory of those who have already finished their course and for the exercising and preparation of those yet to walk in their steps. And it wasn't only St. Polycarp's martyrdom that was being celebrated in these early time periods. Many other feast days commemorating martyrs accumulated over time. And in the mid-300s, it became common practice for churches living in similar regions to come together annually to celebrate all of the martyrs simultaneously and all the saints who might have been forgotten or who might not have relics and be celebrated on a common day. And this practice of commemorating all the saints on a common day, just like commemorating individual martyrs on a specific day, began spreading throughout the Christian empire, and there in different regions were being set days to celebrate it liturgically. One of those days was May 13th, and another one of those days is November 1st. What has also been common since the beginning of Christianity is the celebration of an eve or a vigil of a particular feast day. So the eve of Christmas, Christmas Eve, there's going to be a Christmas vigil. The eve of Easter, there's going to be an Easter vigil. So in common celebrations like All Saints Day, it would make sense that there is a All Saints Eve or an All Saints Vigil the night before All Saints Day. But there wasn't a universally fixed date to commemorate all the saints until Pope Gregory IV, who lived in the 9th century. So up until the 9th century, there were actually multiple different dates in different areas of celebrating All Saints Day, which, like I said, date back at least to the 3rd century. But there's a common practice today becoming even more prevalent because of things like TikTok and Instagram and just other social media of associating a Christian holiday with a supposed pagan counterpart, trying to show that the Christian holiday has roots in the pagan holiday. The result of Christians trying to integrate pagan celebration in order to convert, well, in this case, the Celtics. And the celebration that they pretty much all point to is called Samhain. Now, I know it looks like it's spelled like Samhain or Samhain or I don't even know, Samhain, whatever it is. It was a celebration of the ancient Celtics dating back before, like hundreds of years before Christ even walked the earth. And they say, look, the ancient Celtic pagans, they were celebrating Samhain on October 31st, the night of October 31st, and they were doing all of these pagan rituals, and they were dressing up, and they were sacrificing, and you Christians, you celebrate All Hallows Eve on Samhain in order to convert the pagans and replace that pagan holiday. Well, there's a lot of issues with that claim. First of all, very little is known about the actual celebration, how it was celebrated, when it was celebrated, those sorts of specificities, because it began hundreds of years before Christ, but also because we don't really have a record of it during the time Christians began celebrating All Hallows Eve. Samhain simply means summer's end, and historians speculate that it would have been celebrated at the beginning of the winter season, which marks the dark half of the year, which has some spiritual connotations with the dead rising and opening a portal to the demonic and all this stuff. We have no early records. As I said, we have no early records specifying a specific date for Samhain, or that it was even a major holiday for the Celtics to begin with, or even at the time of Christianity. But people keep claiming that Halloween is rooted in the Samhain festival. So what evidence do they bring to support this notion? Well, if you look at the Halloween celebration today, there's people dressing up, and a lot of people dress up like skeletons and ghosts and ghouls and devils, and that's what they were worried about back in the days that they would celebrate Samhain, and we think Samhain was celebrated on October 31st. So Christians introduced Halloween to take over Samhain. But the practices like giving out treats or apples or nuts or whatever, and dressing up in costumes and going house to house and doing all these things, it's not only is it not unique to any particular culture or observance, but also the modern practice of that occurring originates in America in the 20th century. It might have some British precursors dating back a little bit farther, but one thing's for sure, when Samhain was supposedly overtaken by Halloween, these weren't practices that were customary. No one was dressing up like witches and ghouls and goblins and ghosts and devils and going house to house saying, trick or treat, look, give me my candy. These practices weren't customary for All Hallows Eve. Those are sort of secular accidents about Halloween that have built up in our American culture over time in recent history. So originally, Halloween has nothing to do with dressing up or getting candy or anything like that, or going trick-or-treating. Halloween is a vigil of All Saints' Day. All Saints' Day is a commemoration of those who have gone before us, those who are in the presence of God himself. And it's a celebration of their triumph, of their new birth in the heavenly kingdom. Also, even if we can see that Samhain was indeed celebrated on October 31st, which we don't have any early sources that says that, just because two holidays are celebrated on similar days in history doesn't mean that one comes from the other, or even that they influenced each other in significant ways. There are only so many days in the year, and I mentioned this in my Christmas video, so if you want to watch the Christmas video, Is Christmas Pagan? Check that out after this video. But there are only so many days in the year, so there is a very high possibility, given the many different cultures spread throughout the world and spread throughout history, that multiple different Halloweens can develop and be celebrated on the same day without having anything to do with each other. So even if we can see the historically unfounded position that Samhain was celebrated on October 31st, it doesn't really matter. You can't show that Halloween was intended to supervene and take over Samhain celebrations in order to convert the pagans. But also, that wouldn't really make sense, because October 31st is not All Saints' Day. That's not the holiday that Christians celebrate. It's the eve of All Saints' Day. It's the eve of the holiday. So if Christians wanted to somehow subvert pagan celebration of Samhain in order for them to celebrate All Saints' Day, why wouldn't they put All Saints' Day on October 31st and not on November 1st? The whole reason why there's a slight chronological crossover is because of the vigil, not because of the actual day. But okay, we can concede all that. Let's concede Samhain celebrated on October 31st, and Christians established All Saints' Day on November 1st so that the vigil of All Saints' Day would be celebrated on October 31st. Let's celebrate, or concede, not celebrate. Let's concede those 2 points. Even if Christians were trying to create a holiday to rival pagan celebrations to convince them to be Christian, that's an evangelistic motivation. So what's wrong with that? I have nothing against creating a rival holiday that actually celebrates something spiritually meaningful, eternally meaningful, and actually trying to create within you this motivation to be virtuous, to be saint-like. I'd rather that replace Samhain, which if you look at the accounts that we do have about how it was celebrated in an ancient Celtic civilization, it's very likely that they practiced divination and witchcraft and a lot of weird stuff. So I think it's probably a good thing that the Christian celebration, Halloween, kind of replaces Samhain. So even if we concede every single point of the argument, it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't celebrate Halloween. Halloween is still a Christian holiday. It's still celebrating the saints who are faithful enough to give their lives up for the gospel, for Christ, for spreading his love to others. Now, you may be in the position where you say, look, Braden, I get where you're coming from. I get your points. They make sense. But I just don't agree with the modern secular celebration of Halloween. They get away from the Christian roots. They glorify the devil. They glorify evil. They glorify those sort of evil things, right? And just don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that we ought to stand for the glorification of evil. Obviously, that's evil. We should be completely against the glorification of the devil, the glorification of evil. But there can be a lot of good in practicing these Halloween customs like carving a pumpkin or dressing up or going out trick-or-treating with your friends. Because if you dress up as a character from a movie or a story that invokes virtue, that reminds you and encourages you to show prudence, justice, fortitude, temperance, faith, hope, love, charity, the virtues, to be a good person, if that sort of character encourages you to be that way and actually encourages you to be courageous and to stand up for the good, if that's the sort of message that you're displaying, then I actually think that's a noble way to celebrate Halloween. Allowing kids to use their imagination and dressing up in a character that they're interested in or that piques their interest or that they really enjoy, that is an amazing thing because God gave us our intellect. God gave us that imaginative power for a reason. And even when it comes to scary costumes or scary characters or evil characters, Jimmy Akin actually brought this up in a good broadcast I watched about a year ago, and I'm trying to remember exactly how he phrased it, but the portrayal of evil as what it is, as evil, is a good thing. Because we recognize the evil as something to avoid and fight against. We recognize that as something we ought to respond to with justice and goodness and temperance and prudence. When we display evil for what it is, not as something to be glorified, but something to be fought against, even that is noble. And I think he gave an example of someone playing Judas in a play portraying the Passion. Someone has to play that character Judas, and it's not intrinsically evil to play that evil character. It's a good thing. It's a good thing to show people this is the type of person you have the propensity to be, but you have the opportunity to not be. You have the opportunity to fight against that sin nature that's within you and to fight against injustice that's happening in our world today. Portrayals of evil, so long as they're not glorifying evil, can serve an amazing purpose. But as for dressing up in costumes and giving out candy and carving jack-o'-lanterns and decorating your house and things like that, those can have a redemptive purpose even if their origin isn't Christian. So I encourage you, if you're a Christian and your conscience allows for it, celebrate Halloween, celebrate All Hallows Day, and redeem the season. That actually makes a lot of sense now that I think about it. Thanks for clearing that up. Maybe I shouldn't get all my information from TikTok. If you know a friend or family member who's struggling with this question, send this video to them. Like, subscribe, comment down below if you have any questions, concerns, comments, things of that nature. And let me know, instead of Halloween, is the pagan holiday that we really should be looking out for Independence Day? I mean, it isn't Christian in origin, is it? Do you think the 4th of July is pagan? Anyways, thanks for watching. I hope that by my learning the faith, your faith will be strengthened as well. You have an amazing day, and we'll see you guys next time.